Good evening, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yes, we can hear you, Selena.
Great. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to our IIBA South African Chapter Tools and Techniques session. Thank you all for joining us this evening. We're excited to have you with us. Before we get started, let's go through some quick house rules and event guides. So please remain on mute unless you are invited to speak, and our attendees are asked to keep their videos off during the session. Tonight's presentation will run for approximately 45 minutes, followed by 15 minutes of Q&A. For questions, please post them in the main chat or in the Q&A session throughout the presentation. Our team will monitor the chat and the Q&A session and bring those questions to the presenter at the end of the session. A quick note on recording and slides. Tonight's session will be recorded and the recording will be uploaded to the IIBA South Africa YouTube channel. Please note that the presentation slides will not be distributed. And of course, we'd love to keep you connected with the IIBA South Africa. You can join IIBA, view our upcoming events, and follow us on LinkedIn and Facebook under the IIBA South Africa chapter. If you're interested in presenting at a future session and sharing your own experience, tools, or techniques with the community, please contact professional development at s@southafrica.iiba.org. All of these information will be in the chat. Now on to tonight's presenter. Our topic this evening is Beyond the Requirements document, the Senior BA Toolkit for Influencing Change in Expert-Led Environments. Our speaker, Siphakamiso Lomahoza, brings over 15 years of experience driving transformation within academic institutions using business analysis tools and techniques to design systems, optimize processes, and address complex institutional challenges. He is also a seasoned product owner with experience across projects and product ownership, working across multiple departments and faculties to deliver practical solutions and strengthen institutional processes. Tonight, Siphakamiso will take us beyond the traditional requirements documents and explain why identity matters more than title, the journey from BA to senior BA, solving the right problem, building the case for change, and the techniques that continue to serve us throughout our careers. It's a great opportunity to look at how we can move beyond simply documenting requirements and becoming more effective influencers of change. So without further ado, Siphakamiso, over to you.
Thank you very much, Savina, and good evening to the South African chapter IBA attendees. Hopefully, this is going to be a very informative and very insightful session throughout this presentation. All right, so as introduced, my name is Siphakamiso Lomahoza. I am a product owner with over 15 years of experience, applying business analysis to tools and techniques within the academia sector, right? Everything from requirements elicitation on small departmental projects right through to leading enterprise-wide systems, system rollouts that touch on our entire faculties. So I'm happy that with my space where I've been in, everyone has passed through the academia or the academic sector one way or the other. So we know the different tiers that are there in that particular space. So I normally say to other people, as much as academia is not really corporate, but we encompass the entire corporate sectors in one institutions or in the academia space. Okay. So tonight I wanted us to talk about something that I think a lot of us in the room have felt, but maybe haven't put words to it yet. The quiet frustration of doing excellent analysis and watching a decision get made anyway, based on someone's gut feeling. If that's ever happened to you, I'd say tonight is for you. So we are going to be looking into or reading into the beyond the requirements document. So what I'll be doing is, exactly we'll be looking into how we go through this, how we can walk through it, understanding my journey, understanding how probably you can take from my journey and apply to your journey as well. So firstly, what I want us to look into would be the practical tools and techniques we require, in the business analysis space, the ones that we can apply immediately, not abstract theory, but something sort of practical that we can work with. That's the first one. Secondly, I'm looking into the strategies for building trust, credibility, and influence with the senior stakeholders who currently make decisions without you in the room. So you know that we come in to assist the decision makers, but they definitely want to run the show, want to actually make the decisions regardless of we are there or we are not in that particular room. And then thirdly, which is basically the last one, I want the takeaway here. I want us to look into to have a fresh perspective on the evolving role of a BA or a senior BA, what that title should actually mean today, not what it actually meant a couple of years ago. So yeah, in the 40 minutes together, with the Q&A session, which is the 15 minutes, I want us to to engage and see how we can actually learn from my journey, or how you can learn from my journey. So let's get into it. All right, so what I just did here is to show you, or to have a breakdown of what we are going to be looking into throughout the 45 minutes. So that's the shape of our 45 minutes. So we'll start with why identity matters more than the title. That's the pattern behind expertise overriding evidence, and why that pattern shows up in healthcare, education, engineering, and not just where I work is in academia, but it's across different sectors. So that sets up the problem we are going to be solving tonight or this evening. Then I'll walk you through my own BA journey across three real stages in the academic sector, not a theoretical, I'm not really a theoretical career person, but let's look into the actual roles that I've held and changed what I've changed at each one of them. Now, from there, we are going to get practical, which is now the section 3 is about solving the right problem and building the case using two tools you already have access to. So the one that we are used to as BAs or in the business analysis space would be the root cause analysis, as well as the business case development as well. So what I'll also do is to show you exactly how I applied both with a concrete example. Then the centerpiece of tonight's section 4, this is where I want us to have some takeaways there. The one technique that outlasted every role that I've ever held. This is the part that I want, as I said, I want most you to remember. So I've built in a real case study to show it in action, not just to describe it. Hopefully it's gonna resonate with you. And then we'll close with the last section, which is now the practical takeaways. You can then apply from tomorrow, with whatever stage you're at in your career. Then we'll open it up for 15 minutes for that Q&A. Right. So let's get started on today's section. So just a little bit about me, for context on why I'm presenting here tonight. Well, I'm Siphakamiso Lomahoza, as introduced earlier. I am a product owner with over 15 years driving transformation with academic institutions. So not only have I been interfacing with academic institutions, but also with corporate institutions as well. So I've been using business analysis tools and techniques to design and roll out systems and optimize processes that shape the future of education. Now, so over that time, my work has spanned in multiple departments and as well as faculties, and somewhere I was also a lecturer, guiding systems that strengthen academic integrity and improve the reliability of institutional processes. So things like learning management platforms, grading and assessment workflows, and infrastructure decisions that now affected how thousands of students experience their education day to day. So you might find yourself as we continue, because we have been students at a certain time. So I've also spent most of the time doing the actual work of elicitation, stakeholder engagement, business case development inside real institutions, with real politics, with real budgeting constraints, and real people who don't always want to hear what the data says. I think there we have probably encountered, or we have interacted with this particular such problems previously, or probably even currently. So everything I'm about to share tonight comes directly from that particular work that I've just listed. So it's not really going to be theory that I'm going to be pulling out of a textbook, but it's going to be my lived experience. And well, it does include some mistakes as well along the way. So we'll identify that and we'll see how one have navigated that particular space. So I just want to give you a scenario that I have also encountered in my journey. I think this is more towards when I started as a BA and as a product owner as well. But what I did find that well, in few years ago, I did sit in a room where a university department was choosing a new learning management system. So most of us probably have interacted with the learning management system. A decision that decision of a learning management system would shape how thousands of students actually learned, how they were taught, how are they graded, for years to come. So it's not just one cohort of students, but it's actually, the lifetime of a student from registration all the way to graduation, and the years coming of new students as well. Now, this wasn't a small procurement decision. So as indicated, an LMS mostly would be, or learning management system would be not just a faculty, not a department, not a faculty need, but it's more of an institutional base. So it touched every course, this learning management system, every assignment, submission, every grade, appeal process, for the entire lifespan of the system. Now, on the table were two options. Now, one was designed around the actual student journey, how they engaged with the content, how they actually receive feedback, and how they progress over time. So that tool also had analytics that could, flag a struggling student weeks before they failed a module. The other was a bit simpler and easy to administer. Okay. So with that one said, it was more familiar to the people running the department because it resembled the system they are actually used for the past decade, right? So in the end, they chose the second one, not because the data supported it, but the elicited requirements and the options appraisal both pointed clearly to the first option. So not because that the business case was weaker for the first, it wasn't. They chose it because it felt easier and because the people in that room trusted their own instincts over analyzing sitting right in front of them. Um, so there was a moment, or let me say at that moment, I realized something that has shaped my career ever since, especially in this expert-led environments. So if I remember expert-led environments, we've got academia, we've got the health sector, we've got finance, all of those different sectors. So in this expert-led environments, there's technical competence, right? Which is definitely not just enough as a BA. Now, sound analysis doesn't sell itself. The business analyst has to do that. So everything I'm going to share today or tonight comes out of trying to answer one question since that day. How do you make sure that the right analysis actually wins? Now, the story that I reflected on, it's not just a unique story into education or the academia space. It's not actually even unique to me. So this same pattern has showed up everywhere subject matter experts hold the authority in the room. And I want to widen the lens, for a moment, so you can see this isn't just an academic sector problem. I think in your sector, in your spaces, you would have to identify that when you are dealing with subject matter experts or expert-led sectors, there is going to be that back and forth, that nudging, trying to have experts, um, making decision over a clear methodological process. Now, in healthcare, um, clinical seniority, doctors frequently overrides what elicited requirements and validated process data can actually tell their team. Now, a consultant's clinical instinct about a workflow can outweigh months of process mapping and stakeholder interviews from the analysis team. So in education, as we just saw with my previous story there, I reflected on, now, academic seniority bypasses proper enterprise analysis in favor of whatever option is administratively convenient, familiar, or politically easier to defend at, let's say, at a faculty board or at Senate level. And in engineering, for instance, technical expertise often sidelines structured options appraisal altogether, because the senior engineer in the room would sort of feel their instincts already has the answer. And nobody wants to be the person who questions the most experienced technical mind at the table. So just bring it back to education. We sit with professors, we sit with PhD holders, PhD candidates. So it's quite a seniority, multi-layered sector there. So we need to be able to navigate that particular space. Now, these three different sectors, the three different professions, three completely different vocabularies, but the same underlying pattern, which is authority is being used as a substitute for evidence. And that gap between who holds the authority in the room and who holds the evidence is exactly what we're going to be focusing on or looking into tonight. So let's look at what these two approaches actually look like side by side. So because I think naming them explicitly with what we've just done in the previous slide, now it makes much easier to spot them in this particular layout. So on the left of my slide here, we have the authority-led decisions. And then on the right, we've got the evidence-led analysis, which is authority versus methodology. I termed it in that particular way. So on the left, which is authority-led decisions. Now, this is instinct-based problem framing. Because I've been in this space, because I know this space, because I've been learned, I mastered, I've got a profession in this space. So people tend to use their instincts, right, to approach and solve a certain problem. So someone decides what the problem is based on their own gut feeling, not on their investigation, right? Or sorry, not on investigation. And then also often within the first 5 minutes of a minute, that's when they actually then don't want to hear anything else, but they've got a problem. They want to resolve it. And since they've been there in that space, they deem to say, this is how we can do it. We have the know-how of doing it. So it's verbal or anecdotal justification of, in my experience, I've seen this before, right? So that's basically standing in for actual evidence that we as PAs would have to actually prove or actually share. Now, this is a decision scoped only to one stakeholder's comfort, which is our expert in that particular sector or in that particular room. Now, meaning nobody then now has asked if it affects the three other departments downstream and its convenience weighted above outcome data simply or in every single time that there's a trade-off to basically make. So that is going to be the authoritative or the authority-led decisions. Now, on the right-hand side, this is where we come in as bringing in the evidence, bring in the analysis. So here we are more methodological, and also we have more of a structured approach to elicitation as well as root cause analysis. So in this particular, on the right-hand side, with this particular method, we are actually getting to the bottom of the problem before proposing a fix, using techniques like the 5 whys instead of accepting the first explanation that has been offered of that particular problem. Now, it's documented criteria-weighted options appraisal, comparing choices on paper against the criteria stakeholders themselves agreed to in advance. So not decided in someone's head in that particular moment, and also not using what we call, my experience was basically that. So if we're going to be methodological, we're going to then have a decision scoped to enterprise-wide impact, not just one department convenience. So, and its outcome is tied to define KPIs and business value to success, or so success is measurable afterwards. So not just assumed as the time, that it was taken, right? But we are looking into the entire evidence-led or evidence-based analysis that drives that particular process. So generally, let's think about the last 3 significant decisions made in your sector, in your space, in your organization. How many of them were made on that side of the slide, which is the authority or the left side of the slide? If you just have to think in a moment. So seniority really signals confidence. It does not signal the methodology or methodological objectivity, and that distinction is the whole reason I wanted to structure my presentation on. So here's the real risk. And I want to be direct about it because I think we sometimes often soften this a bit too much, right? Now, when we operate on the left-hand side of the slide, which is the authority-led, we get to be seen as technicians. We are PAs, right? We're supposed to be actually assisting and bringing value, but we are definitely being seen as technicians. That means we document requirements after the decision has already been made, essentially writing the minutes for a meeting we weren't even invited to shape, right? So we produce process maps that nobody references us against once the project has closed. We get measured on completeness. Did you fill in the template correctly? Did you tick every box? Not on whether our thinking actually changed that particular outcome. But when we operate on the right, we get positioned as a strategic partner. So we get to shape now the options before the decision is basically made, not thereafter. So meaning we are in the room when it matters, not summarizing the room afterwards. So we're not note takers. We are not just our document or paper pushers. We deliver enterprise analysis that stakeholders actually act on. So not analysis that sits and basically is shared or it's put in the shared drive for everyone to open when they think they've got time to view it. And then we get measured on adoption and enterprise-wide outcomes on whether what we recommended actually happened and actually worked months or years basically later. Now, so let me take you through my journey over my past 15 years. I've worked across these three distinct stages in the academic sector. I did say that I was a lecturer at a certain point, but we had business analyst. Well, I was a business analyst, I was a product owner, and eventually I was able to, move my way all the way or navigate my way all the way to the enterprise level. So what I want to talk through today is all three in some bit of detail. I am going cognizant of the time because I want to touch it on detail because that's the thing I want us to notice as we go. The tools I was using barely changed from stage to stage. I was still doing the requirements elicitation. I was still doing the stakeholder analysis. I was still doing the root cause analysis as well as the business case in every stage. However, what changed was the relationship with these particular tools, how I applied them, who I had to convince to act on them, and how much of the institution my thinking had to cover before a decision could actually move forward. So think of it like a lens that's zooming out over this 15 years, and let's just go through these particular stages. So stage one, like any other BA, right? I was doing most of what we normally start with, which is gathering and documenting requirements. That's from academic departments, running elicitation workshops, one-on-one interviews, and learning the institutional landscapes. So as you know, landscape is normally learned by policies as well as the approval chains, the competing priorities between departments, right? So budgets as well as the now, a big part of this stage was mapping the existing processes before I proposed any change at all. If I were to be honest, in my first year, I made mistakes. Plenty of us do. Proposing a fix before I'd fully mapped the existing process and having a department head point out and that I've missed an entire approval step. So that mistake taught me to slow down, take one step back. I wasn't yet in a position to influence decision at that particular stage. So I built my credibility the way most of us do early, through accuracy and thoroughness, one project at a time. So now every requirement is documented accurately. Every process map that held up under scrutiny when a skeptical stakeholder pushed back on it actually assisted to build this repertoire, to be able to build this credibility. Now, in stage two, this is where things shifted noticeably from when I started as a BA. I then stepped into, you partly a BA, but also a product owner. So I stepped into the product ownership role, and that changed my job from documenting decisions to actually shaping them. Now, I was in a position now owning the backlog and prioritization of system rollouts. This including the learning management system project I opened with tonight. Now, this stage was about translating stakeholder requirements into defensible product roadmap, not just writing down what people had said they wanted in the interview, but structuring into something an institution could actually commit budget and timeline and defend to a steering committee. So it also means, or it also meant for me, owning trade-offs directly for the first time. If two departments wanted conflicting features in the same release, the decision now sat with me, and I had to be able to justify with evidence, not just your preference, right? On which looks better, which sounds better. So, and this is also the stage where I'd say I learned the hard way that a strong business case can actually lose to a familiar option, which you already heard in my opening story about the LMS. Now, being right about the analysis was not the same as winning the room, because we can draft good analysis. Now, that gap between correctness and persuasion is exactly what pushed me to develop the technique I'm going to show you shortly. Now, stage 3 is where I am now. I am operating, I would say, in a more of an enterprise level. This is best captured by a project like we call it Cloud Labs, not specifically the name of the project itself, but it's labs that would be running in a cloud, unlike having labs running physically within the institution. So what I'll do is I'm just going to quickly walk you through a full detail shortly where the stakes, moved from beyond one department to, to weighing now the costs, access to equity, scalability, and so on. So at this stage, I was working directly with the deans and the senior academics, not just the project sponsors and a few levels down the organization. Now, that's the difference. That's a different kind of stakeholder engagement entirely. These are the people with decades of institutional authority and the experts within the academic space. So they've got stronger opinions because they've formed these opinions through long careers. I mean, when they're studying as well, that title also, it, it makes their opinions much, much stronger in the academia space. Now, the discipline required shifting or that I had to shift in terms of my thinking. So I was no longer just applying the analysis to a single project. However, I was applying an enterprise analysis. Think about how one decision in one faculty could set precedent and a ripple effect in the budgets conversations elsewhere, right? So here's the thorough line across all the stages, all the 3 stages, from the BA to product owner, to become a senior BA as well. And I think this is the single most useful idea in this whole section. So the tools did not change. Requirements elicitation was there, root cause analysis has been there, options, appraisals are there, and business case development is definitely there. So what changed was the relationship with these particular tools. So how much scope they had to cover, how many stakeholders I had to bring along before a decision could be moved or should be or could be taken. Now, same foundation, scope of of influence. Now I say growing scope of influence or creating influence, right? It's because I want you to understand or hear it as encouraging or not really intimidation or intimidating, let me put it that way. So you don't need a completely different skill set to grow into a senior role. From, as you saw, from my, junior years up until where I'm currently at, you need to apply the skills you have already at a wider scale with more stakeholders and more consequence riding on each decision. And that raises the question I want to answer next. If the tool stayed largely the same, was there one technique, one habit that mattered at every single stage, regardless of the scope? So as a BA, looking at the journey, I built credibility through accurate, thorough requirements work, slow, deliberate, but necessary work, right? As a product owner, I learned that a strong business case can actually still lose to a familiar option. That was the LMS story I had actually touched on. And at an enterprise lead or level, I started weighing the decisions across departments and faculties, not just one team. That's where the Cloud Lab story then comes in because now it's more throughout the different departments. So same foundation throughout all the stages. So what changed was the scope and the stakes. So what I want to show you next is the actual toolkit that carried me through all these three stages, starting with how to solve the right problem and build a case that holds under real scrutiny. So in this section, I want to hand you two tools, right? You could definitely use immediately, right? Problem framing with root cause analysis and business case development that actually lands with decision makers instead of, gathering dust or being somewhere in a shared drive there. Now, I'll give you a concrete worked on example for each, just so that you can understand that it's not a theory, but it's something that it can be practically done. Now, the first tool is root cause analysis. I want to be upfront. This is not a new invention. It's not something that I came up with. This is well established, elicitation analysis technique, often called the 5 whys. And it sits at the core of any structured BA toolkit. So now what I want to show you is how to apply it in practice. So the discipline here is simple to say and hard to do, right? So it's simple to say, make sure that we apply the whys, apply the 5 whys, but definitely quite of a challenge to do it. So we need to ask why repeatedly. Usually, 4 times, 5 times before you accept the first explanation you are given and never propose a solution at that particular time. Now, most of the bad decisions I've seen in my career, it didn't come from a bad solution. They actually came from solving the wrong problem, but confidently. Let's look at just a practical example that I've sort of drawn and saw something similar to this. So a department came to me. In our case, it would have to come to you as a BA. And then they asked for a simpler grading tool. Right, so we all know that we need to do assessments. We need to be able to grade. In the grading, we need to have constructive feedback. Now, if you take that request at face value, right, you go shopping for software. I mean, that's what businesses do. That's what expert-led spaces do. They go shopping for software, or literally go look for vendor comparison and spend budget solving the wrong thing. But the root cause analysis is asking why repeatedly so that we can actually get to the root of the problem. So one, in this case, I had to ask, why is the grading slow, right? Why do approvals have to take so long? Why does that next step exist? So those are the whys. So in cases like this, the real issue is an undocumented approval workflow quietly adding 2 weeks to every grade release, right? So we write our assessments, we grade the students, but now for it to be released as this undocumented approval workflow. So we fix the workflow and the need for a brand new tool disappears entirely. So what we have done there is to save the institution's budget and also the disruptions. So it takes more time upfront, but it does save far more time and definitely for an institution money downstream. Now, the second tool is business case development and is where technically correct analysis either lands or dies in that particular room. So I want to be specific about what good looks here because vague advice like write a clear business case doesn't actually help anyone. So now, firstly, speak in outcomes, decision makers, values, not BA jargon. So the dean does not care about any process optimization, but they do care about student outcomes and reputational risks. Secondly, tie every recommendation to a measurable KPI. And then thirdly, understand understand that doing this well is actually itself a credibility move. So when you speak in the language of the person that you're trying to influence and convince and you're proving to in that moment, that you understand, then you display that you actually understand their particular word. Right. So now let's look into the LMS decision, right? Into using these two tools, right? So the case was right on paper, just that it hadn't been built to withstand the room it was presented in, right? So you have to have a flawless root cause analysis and bulletproof business case, and you still lose if you haven't also done the work of understanding what's really driving the resistance in this particular room. So the gap between a sound case and a persuasive one is exactly what the next session I'd wanted to touch on, which is the one technique that has outlasted every role. So in my own synthesis of these two things in the BA toolkit, right, which already gives us stakeholder analysis, which asks us to understand the stakeholders' underlying interest. So we not just their own position or stated position and the root cause thinking, the 5 whys we just covered, which is now applicable or applied to a person's resistance instead of a process problem. So if you put those two together, you get one portable question before you propose what a decision should change. Ask what that decision is really protecting. Okay. So a quick one on this one. Here's how that one question actually traveled with me, changing slightly at each stage while asking essentially the same underlying or the same thing. Now, as a PA, it is the process the department wants or the problem the institution actually has. That kept me from documenting a symptom instead of a cause. As a product owner, it became, is this feature protecting the student experience or protecting the department's comfort? So an enterprise level, so it became, is this decision actually now protecting the institution or protecting the stakeholders' certainty? So on paper, this was a clear to win, lower long-term infrastructure costs, better access for students who commute or work, work part-time and meaningfully safety improvement, So the friction came from the dean who favored keeping the traditional on-site lab. So their reasoning was to be risk averse. So instead of arguing harder about connectivity statistics, safety statistics, as I've mentioned above, I ask the question, what is this decision really protecting? And the honest answer, once I dug into through a few informal conversations, wasn't really about the computers as all. It was now about the budget as well as the familiarity of the systems or of the processes as well. So bring it together. So what we've covered or what we've looked into is the pattern behind expert-led decision-making, Well, I looked into my journey across these 3 stages, 2 practical tools, and 1 signature technique tested on real case studies. Now, what I want to land with you or somewhere useful for us. So whatever stage that we are in or you are in at the current moment in your career, I think here are 4 things I'd want us to keep in mind, or as a parting shot. Be able to translate your wins into institutional language. Find the BA thread in every role. Let's be able to build the trust, build the credibility throughout the different disciplines, throughout the different stages of our career. And then stay curious about the business, not just the process. So we're not only focusing on the process, but it's the business in whole. Because what the experts in that sector, they look it from the entire business, not only on the process that is being well, we're trying to resolve at that particular moment. So tonight, there's 3 things I wanted us to look into: practical tools and the techniques you can apply immediately. And then I wanted us to look into the strategies for building trust, credibility, and influence, a fresh perspective on the role of a BA. And I do hope that out of all the 3, at least one idea tonight sticks with you long after this particular presentation. So in essence, being right is not enough. Sound analysis does not sell itself, but the business analyst has to. That is the end of my presentation, and I thank you for being part of tonight's presentation.
Thank you
Thank you
so
so
much,
much.
Sipa.
Thank you so much, Siphakamiso, for that insightful session. There's certainly a lot for us to take away from what you've shared tonight. We're now going to move into our Q&A session. For everyone attending, if you've posted a question in the chat or the Q&A session, thank you very much. Our team has been monitoring the questions, and I'll hand over to Vomani and Lalita to go through them.
Thanks, Davina. So Rob's shared quite a bit of interesting snippets into the chat, but I'll pull out just the questions. So the first one is, what's common and typical is that authority sits with persons A, B, C, and accountability sits with persons D, E, and F. We decouple authority and accountability.
Apologies, can you please just repeat that? I'm not sure if it was a question or a statement.
I think it's a statement here. He's just saying that the authority sits with different people versus the accountability sitting with other people. So there's that decoupling of authority and accountability. And methodology is software-centric, not trustworthiness-centric.
Yeah.
So
No,
I have a question for you. And my question was, how do you get invited into the room to shape those decisions? So it's all very well to say that you need to be part of the people making the decisions and not just documenting based on decisions already made. But how do you get that first step into the room to actually be able to shape those decisions and be part of that decision making?
Thank you for that question. So I've got a very good friend of mine. He spoke about systems thinking. So for you to be in that particular room, you'd see as in one of my later or my last slides, we should not be showing that we understand a process, but we understand the entire ecosystem as we engage actually outside of the room before we start working into the room. So we need to understand the entire ecosystem, understanding what are the pros, what are the cons, what are the pain points, how do we really resolve, do we dig deep down, and how do we then ensure that the budget within this issue, within this challenge that we're experiencing, can be well managed without, going well and above and beyond, spending quite a lot of resources. So the first step is to just have that understanding of the entire ecosystem, understand where are the pain points, understand who is actually the pulling power, where's the influence coming from. Then you speak to the problem using that particular language.
Thank you for that. Here's another one. The biggest problem nearly everywhere once BAs are treated as technicians, they simply become glorified note takers or technical writers until something goes horribly wrong or there is an audit question that no authoritarian wants to answer. I think that's a statement as well.
Can I just add something on that statement?
Yes, sure, please do.
Yeah. Yeah, I really concur with that particular statement, because what has turned out to be is that we as it says, we're becoming technicians, quite a lot of technicians. We're good at what we are doing, but as much as we are technicians, we are also shooting ourselves on our foot. We are not speaking the terms, or we're not using the right terminology to speak to these experts leading this particular sector. So a shift in the way we present ourselves, the way we conversate, we look for credibility. It should align to the experts within this industry.
Okay, thank you for that. Our next question is from Liana. How did you, Siphakamiso, build the credibility needed to transition from documenting decisions to actively shaping them?
Okay, please say that again. How did I?
How did you build the credibility needed to transition from documenting decisions to actively shaping them? And I think this is like a follow-on from the question that I had asked you as well.
Oh, okay. So first of all, as BAs, if we are able to elicit and also, have a proper analysis whereby when it is going to be tested, it does stand um, against any scrutiny. So if you are able to draft requirements that do not become questionable at a later stage. So that is the first part of where you can be said you are a credible person. And then moving then to another level would now then be able to execute to understand the other requirements that have been drafted by the other BAs, or actually drive or enforce how everything should be adopted in that sector or in that organization, in that space that you're in. So your credibility in what you do, and then transitioning to now assisting the others, or actually being able to um, understand what the others are doing and then redirect them to now fit the business case or fit that particular case of that organization.
Okay, another one. How did the mindset shift into changing conversations to decision-led enterprise analysis outcome compared to low-level requirements or solutions-based conversations?
That's a very good question. I think as a BA, as I said, we tend to focus on the process, on the problem, which is at a smaller level, right? And we're trying to outshine or shine in that particular smaller level. But if we're to expand our engagement with the stakeholders, right? Don't only speak to the let's say the end users that have the problem, but look into the wider or cast your net much wider. Go all the way up and go to understand who actually controls the decisions, where are the pain points again on that particular point. Then definitely that's going to assist you, right? So the transition should be always focus yourself from not only from the users or the low-lying problem, but the entire ecosystem where the problem actually lies, and where that particular solution, once presented, is not only going to be solving that lower level, but it's mostly going to be solving at a quite a higher level.
We have a new one that's just come in. Can you give an example of the projects that you mentioned that did not go as planned because you were confident in solving the wrong problem?
Right. So before I actually bring myself to saying that project did not go well, you know, when you are being led by an expert in that particular, let's say, a subject matter expert, and then you come in later on and trying to, you know, become the BA in that space. So I was part of it was one of our grading tools as well. So we were directed to look for one. We had the problem, we understood the problem, but instead of now, you know, developing one that's going to be sort of custom made for that environment or for that particular type of students, we had to run and go to, you know, off the shelf, look for a vendor who can provide us with this. So we had actually um, had the requirement, the specifications, but now we were told, let's go and go for a over the counter solution. So when we had to implement it, we tried by all means to not to. So what happened was we did not fit the student. The system did not fit the needs of the student, but we had to force the student into the operations of the system. So that project definitely failed. I would say that it did not even last because if you know the academia terminology didn't last over 2 semesters because we could not customize it to suit what the requirements, what the pain points were at that particular time.
Hey, thank you, Siphakamiso, for taking the time to answer those questions. That was the last one in the chat. So thank you for sharing your experience and insights with us this evening. And thank you to everyone who joined us and participated in tonight's session. I'd also like to give a special thank you to our KZN volunteers who lent their support this evening by helping us manage and monitor the chat. We really appreciate you giving your time and supporting the session behind the scenes. Your contribution helps us create a smooth experience for everyone attending. To everyone joining us, remember that the recording will be uploaded to the IIBA South Africa YouTube channel, so you'll be able to revisit the session. Please also stay connected with IIBA South Africa through our social media channels and keep an eye out for our upcoming events. And if you have knowledge, experience, or a tool or a technique that you'd like to share with our BA community, we'd love to hear from you. You can contact professional development at southafrica.iiba.org if you're interested in presenting at a future session. Once again, thank you, Siphakamiso, and thank you to everyone who joined us tonight. Have a wonderful evening, everyone, and we look forward to seeing you at our next IIBA South Africa chapter Tools and Techniques session. Good evening and thank you.
Thank you.
Okay,
Thank you so
thank you.
much.